Thanks for joining the PartsCast. Eric Koenig here, VP of Brand and Communication with PartsTown. And on today's episode, we're talking IoT, or Internet of Things. It's a concept or a topic we've touched on before in previous PartsCasts, but there's so much going on with the pandemic and the need for speed when it comes to technology adoption. We thought it was a good opportunity to get a different perspective and have a really good conversation about where should we go as an industry. But before we jump into the PartsCast, I also want to talk to everybody about TechTown. It is the online resource for service technicians to ask, share, and repair. So if you've got a question about a tricky fryer, a walk-in not behaving correctly, check out TechTown. That's techtownforum.com. Ask, share, repair. The answers you're looking for are there. And best of all, it's free. Now with that, let's cue the music. Joining us today is Joe McQuaid, Senior Director of E-Commerce with PartsTown. And Joe is going to help us walk through IoT as it relates to food service and why the pandemic has potentially or really has shifted the need to speed things up. So first, Joe, thanks for joining the PartsCast.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Thanks for having me on.
And Joe, before we dig into the discussion, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role with PartsTown?
Yeah, sure. So like you said, I'm currently the Senior Director here at PartsTown, the e-commerce team. I've been with PartsTown for about 6.5 years. So for about 5 of those years, though, I was actually the director for the ERP team. And then recently, like I said, joined the e-commerce team. So I love all things technology, whether it's, behind the scenes or in, customer facing. But yeah, like I said, I'm glad to be here and discuss this topic with you.
Great. So, as I mentioned at the outset, the Internet of Things, and it's really about connectivity and creating a web within our food service operations from front of house to back of house. And as the pandemic has asked us to do, which is make changes, we've got apps for ordering, apps for delivery, apps and touchless payment options. But one of the things that isn't necessarily always talked about is sort of this backup, the equipment. So when you think about food service equipment, and connectivity and Internet of Things, what are some big ideas that really have been piquing your interest as you look at this stuff?
Yeah. So I think the burning question is how to be more proactive instead of reactive for equipment, especially when it's around the topic of maintenance, right? So how do I know when my machine is going to break, and not only break, but parts are going to be needed to fix that. So, it's interesting. A lot of manufacturers are talking about, new equipment that are coming out, this year, next year, whatever it may be, that are going to be, somewhat IoT enabled, meaning that they're intelligent and they can communicate these things. But obviously the landscape is filled with tons of older equipment. So how do we take equipment that technically speaking is not a smart device, right? And make it that. So what we got to think about is the hardware or things that you can retrofit onto these pieces of equipment that can hold data from that piece of equipment. So it could be anything from sensors that are gauging vibrations of a piece of equipment or temperature, things that will be able to, over time with enough data, give us some type of inclination that something's wrong with this piece of equipment. I think starting with the obvious low-hanging fruit is the best way. So like smart temperature or thermostats, right? Things that are in the fridge or the freezer or in your fryer that can understand the gauge that these temperatures should be. And when they're not, instantly text message, a manager or service technician to come and take a look at it. I think also, cameras are probably the thing that I love. And, people always talk about sensors, but cameras, like an image is 1,000 words. A video is probably 1,000,000 words, right? In a video feed, you can see tons of things that are happening. Are people cleaning the device when they should be? Are they turning off the device when they should be? Are they cycling the device when they should be? Is the fridge door ajar? Like all these things you can capture from a video and immediately send out, text and alerts. So I think before we jump into like the super complicated sensors, let's get the low hanging fruit, the smart thermostats, the cameras that can see operations and get that in the field. I think would It's the things that excite me and gain the most value at this time.
Yeah, the camera piece is, it's interesting that you bring that up because it's really the first time I've heard that spoken about when you think about food service or just back of house operations. Because with back of house, it's constantly rotating through. You're not necessarily working in the same job every day, or the staff that you have on isn't the same staff, so you lose consistency, and so you're losing training and all of those opportunities that would help us capture some of those low hanging fruit, as you would say. But those common, if I just do this, I'm going to gain efficiencies. And I think the other point you bring up too is that retrofitting of existing equipment. And are there simple operations that we can start? I think of a company like Kitchen Brains, who is more agnostic when it comes to the different types of sensors that they can place on pieces of equipment versus some of the manufacturers who are bringing items to life. Because I think we run into some challenges from that perspective too, because no one kitchen is beholden to a single manufacturer or a group of manufacturers underneath one umbrella, because we still want choice. And I think that also then begins to present the other issue with connectivity within kitchens too, is we're still a very fragmented industry. And how do we start to unify and create a language around getting that information out? So I think, to your point, taking a step back and look for the low hanging fruit is a really good opportunity. Are there some other low hanging fruit opportunities when you think about food service operations that people should consider, or even maybe if it's even adaptive technology, and said like the camera light, is there something else that you sit there and look at from a technology perspective and said, if we just did this, we could save some time and energy?
I think you said a few good points there, and again, I don't want to harp on the camera thing, but one video feed can be splintered off to handle a lot of business questions, right? So we kind of talked about the maintenance thing, where it can be watching sort of the machines and picking up on things like that. But that same video feed, like you said, there could be new staff that are just constantly being turned over. It could be alerting them of proper ways to move around the kitchen, right? They could be wearing, even right now it's expensive, but glasses, like, where it can tell them where to step, what to do, right? So for safety concerns, or just efficiency, how to move around the kitchen. Could also be feeding in order details to the people that are making the food, and recognizing what they're putting into the for a quick service restaurants, like, are they putting the correct food in the bag, right? So for recognition, alerting, I think is going to be also key, and could be also low hanging fruit for these type of operations, but also for marketing and sales, right? So I know this gets into the creepy realm, but like, you can start recognizing customers that constantly come to your establishment and understand what they like to order. So the wait staff can suggest things that may pique their interest for upsells. And I'm sure you're going to get into this, but there are ways that you can tokenize this data, that even if somebody was to hack it, they would still not be able to get to hey, this is so and so, and all their personal data. So I know that was kind of a ramble there, but the point of it is, from a camera feed, I think there's a lot of low hanging fruit for many facets of a business that can be analyzed and used in an efficient manner.
Yeah, well, and I mean, and you bring up the glasses. I mean, I think I look at the glasses as an opportunity for consultants and the individuals who design kitchen layouts to sort of look at and understand the path to create, how do I shorten the steps to get from, prep table to grill, or from grill to fryer, or to walk in, or to reach in, and all that sort of stuff. So those ergonomic studies that, could become really valuable. Like, I know one manufacturer, Electrolux, has also done some testing around ergonomics and things like that, and is actually won awards. And I think the more we start to think about technology as our friend, the more it opens up the door to do that. Because you also mentioned being able to time or understand customer behavior or customer patterns, and that's the gold mine. And I think that's really what we're also trying to get at with all of this data available to us, is how do we make the customer experience seamless and deliver what they want when they want it, and provide the freshest meal potentially out there. So yeah, let's circle back a little bit and talk about data. And so again, I mentioned that not every food service equipment manufacturer is going to own a kitchen. That creates a lot of different potential data languages out there. What are some things to consider when we think about data from that perspective, and then as we move into who owns it, how do we protect it?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So I think the true answer to that whole, every device manufacturer, whatever it may be, is going to be speaking sort of a different language, right? So how do we get an answer to analyze all that stuff? So the short answer is you need like a Rosetta Stone, and for the broad answer is a platform that is able to take in all these different data feeds and different data types, and then be able to manipulate it or refine it in a way that then other devices and other people can understand it. So there's I think the last time I checked, there's over 600 IoT platforms, right? And they kind of all do different things, but I think one specifically for the restaurant kitchen industry, which would be very niche to the things that we're going to be looking for, and make it as easy as possible to hook into, is going to be the true answer for your question there.
Yeah, it's sort of like the holy grail of our industry. NAPHAM, which is the association that works with all the manufacturers, has what they've for the last, I don't know, I think it's 20 years old at this point. Don't quote me, but the NAPHAM data protocol, and it was really designed to help us get to this shared language, and we haven't gotten there yet. And I think that too, I go back to it. It's for me personally, it's been one of my soapboxes. I was at a conference, a Fed conference, which is put on by FE&S every other year, and there was a gentleman from a combi oven company. They might be from Europe, and he might be German. And for those of you, I'm trying not to say it, but try to narrow it down. But his big takeaway is whoever creates a common language for food service equipment is going to win the day. And and I think that's the real question we as an industry have to ask ourselves: is who wants to champion that? Is it a parts distributor? Is it a service company? Is it a food service manufacturer? Is it an outside? Because I think the thing that I look at our industry and I get fearful of is it's going to be from the outside. And I think when we let things come in from the outside, potentially we lose control a little bit of what we truly need to deliver a customer experience. So Joe, I'd love to get your sort of opinion on what might be the best way to get to a common language.
Yeah. So again, back to the platform, I agree with what you were saying there. Is sort of person to build this is going to be the one that's setting the standards, right? So I personally think it makes sense for a distributor in the space to build that platform, because we're already the hub to all the spokes, right? So we partner with service companies, we partner with manufacturers, and we partner with the restaurants, right? So for an outsider to come in, like you said, they don't truly understand the landscape. I don't think as well as a larger distributor like PartsCast. So if we were to build this platform and we set up the protocols and standards, and we get a few beta testers to work out the kinks. I think after that, the tipping point is is pretty aggressive, and everybody in the industry would start jumping on. But like you said, it's whoever is going to be the first person to develop and build this platform. I think is going to be the leader, and the one that sets the rules.
Yeah, no, I agree. I have for quite a while said the future of parts distribution is really not about the part, and it gets back to your point about where are the hubcap in the spoke of in the wheel of the entire industry, or the nucleus of what's going on in the entire industry, because we have access to the entire industry. Either a piece of equipment's under warranty, or it's break fix, or we're working with manufacturers to set out rollout programs, or we're working with service companies to distribute technical information. You name it, we've got a touch point. So when you think about the data protocols, one of the questions that inevitably comes up is it's how do we partition the data to say manufacturer A only gets manufacturer A data, manufacturer B only gets manufacturer B data, and then the end user gets it all, because we don't want 12 apps sitting on our phone trying to figure out how I do this. We want one. So how do we start to answer that data partitioning and then data ownership question?
Yeah, again, very good and very complicated question. But to give a high level, my opinion is, the analogy I always use is, data is the new oil. So you can think of the platform as like a refinery, right? So refineries give oil to, jet fuel is different than the fuel that you put in your car, and different than the oil that goes to plastic companies, right? So I think if you envision the platform as a refinery, we've taken all the data, and we have specific rules and business logic around on how to siphon and refine that data, and then package it up nicely and feed it to all the different players and partners that are on this platform. So again, a very broad, high-level answer, but I think that's the best way to describe it.
No, I really like your analogy, because it allows us to take in that core element, which is the ones and zeros, of the bits and bytes, and get to the most useful packaging of that data, from when to drop a basket of fries to, all right, this is throwing off this error code, or it's time to change the oil in the fryer. One of the other things that I always come back to, at least for me, and love to get your opinion of it as well, is and you touched on it a little bit earlier in, was running too fast to get to all of the sensors and everything that you'd want to put on a piece of equipment to get everything out of it, to create get to preventative fixes, or versus reactive fixes. Is I always look at who stands in front of a piece of equipment. There is the person who is doing the day-to-day work on that piece of equipment, and that person could be there for 1 year, 2 years, to 10 days, to it varies all the time, to the owner of the store, or the manager of the store, and then to the service technician who makes the repair. And I feel like, with all of our desire to be connected and to talk about connectivity, and it solves these problems, I feel like we sometimes forget to ask the simple question: is what questions are being asked when I'm standing in front of a piece of equipment? And what could be some technology opportunities from that perspective to help those three types of basic customers of that piece of equipment?
Yeah. So I think a lot of people that are, would be listening to this immediately say, well, there's the QR code possible answer, right? And I know people have tried this, right? You put the QR code on there, and you can scan it, and people can then upload information to wherever that QR code is sending you, either to, a database or a website, or wherever that may be. I think the issue, though, is, typically that would be like, that QR code would be specific to a the company or the restaurant itself. So this goes back to who can access this data and who are you going to make it available to, right? So if in this scenario, I think if the restaurant owner put QR codes on and gave a password or username or whatever, it doesn't matter who the service technician is or who the manager is or whoever may be standing in front of the equipment, because the owner essentially is allowing whoever that person may be access to the information. So scan the QR code and service technicians can enter data, maintenance data about it. The managers or operators can enter information about cleaning cycles or any other type of useful information. And essentially, again, if manager changes or you switch service technicians or service company, whoever then is coming, they'll still have access to all that information that was, previously given by other people standing at that piece of equipment.
Okay, which I guess brings me to another piece of the Internet of Things. It's the things that are in the cloud, and how do we manage content, and how do we manage, and not only manage but make sure that the content's relevant and the content's accessible to who it needs to be. So it gets builds a little bit on the how do we partition data, but also it's that how do we manage content in the Internet of Things?
Yeah, I would say that responsibility, right, is to the individuals that are sending or uploading that data to the platform, right? So, again, if it's the owner of a store, right, back to the QR code, right, maybe the individuals that are scanning the QR code, with their smartphone or whatever the device is, recognizes who that user is, and based on business logic that is set up in the platform, that specific content that would be viable for the manager is fed to them, where if a service technician was to scan the code, there's different logic in there to feed maintenance information about the piece of equipment. So again, though, like the key is to make this as easy and dummy proof for whoever is working the platform to set this up, so that you don't need a large IT group to manage all this, that an owner or a business user is able to go on the platform and it's an easy GUI interface that you can modify and pretty much set everything up that way.
And then for our less technical savvy listeners, what is a GUI interface?
That stands for graphical user interface. So if you're like Windows is the first operating system that had a GUI, so it's easy that you can double click things on the screen. You can visually see windows and applications instead of needing to type in commands and do a command prompt. So
excellent. Thanks for that, because I won't some of us are older out there when we listen to the podcast. Because part of the technology piece, and this is a little bit off topic, but part of our industry really looking at and embracing and speeding up the pace of innovation and technology adoption is also there to help us get younger as an industry. I think enough of us go to when we had trade shows and conferences, can look around the room and say, we've got to get younger. And how do we do that? And how do we attract talent? And if we are not looking at technology as a platform of innovation and advancement, we may not actually get younger as an industry. And I think, that's also part of the consideration when we talk about, embracing technology and solving our technology challenges as an industry too. So again, a little bit of a wander on that one, but I always like to reinforce that from an industry perspective, we've got to continually look for ways to bring new blood into the industry. So one of the so we talked about connecting pieces of equipment. We talked about some data protocols. We've talked about accessing content. How do we then take all of this information to start to think through how do we personalize an experience for an end user? Because no matter from food service consultant to manufacturer to dealer to manufacturer rep to service technician, we're all looking to serve that end user customer who's picking up that meal or having that meal served to them at a table. How do we sort of harness that data and this information to really help personalize those experiences from your perspective?
Yeah, no, another great question. And when you started the podcast here, you mentioned how COVID is changing a lot of things, especially in the personalized space, especially in restaurants. So how do we keep that personalization or increase it even in times where you can't really be that personal, right? So back to the data that we're collecting, the video streams. I'm not trying to harp on this, but like you can get down to the granular level of sentiment of what a person is feeling. Are they happy? Are they sad? Are they angry? Are they frustrated? Right? So you can even set up alerts where if someone's sitting at a table and for whatever reason it's reaching past a threshold of whatever the business operators want to set, and alerts our wait staff to immediately go over to that table to provide attention to whoever's sitting there. If they're angry, maybe send over a wait staff to see what the deal is. So I think a lot of things around that you can do, and then also the whole geolocating and recognizing who the user is in your restaurant. You can send text messages specifically, for deals or coupons on things that that they're going to like. And again, this is all coming from the data that you have to collect, and it will take some time. But once you collect enough data on specific users, you can become very personal in the messages that you're going to be texting them or informing your wait staff of how to engage that customer.
Yeah, I know, and I want to say it was last year Burger King ran a Whopper promotion that if you signed up online or you were part of their email, and you had their app, and if you drove within a certain radius of a Burger King, it would text you and say, hey, stop by for a free Whopper or something like that. I mean, I think there's like endless possibilities because we're never without our phone, and so how do we can start to bring in all of that information, or look at it from another manufacturer or another QSR perspective is you order online and you're driving to pick it up, or your Uber guy is driving to pick it up, and you cross a threshold and it says drop the fries, and put the I don't want to I use apparently I use fries a lot just because French fries are good, but fryers are also the most common piece of equipment in a lot of food service offerings. But yeah, I mean, I think again, using it's up to us to use the data because the data exists. It's out there in the soup, and so how do we organize it and how do we bring it to bear to really impact the entire industry is a pivotal question. And then from there, what's that language? So with your experience with the industry, how ready do you think we are as an industry? Because we talk about it a lot, but we haven't necessarily seen some of the giant moves that one would expect when you think about technology and the rate of change. And I can't again fault me, and maybe you've got the answer. Who is it's there's a name for it when about the pace of technology. I can't remember the gentleman's name who coined it, um, but I think how ready are we as an industry for this true data organization and connectivity and use of data?
So I think the desire is definitely there, but I think this goes back to one of your previous questions. Is I think people are just waiting for someone to take the initiative to fully develop it, right? Like we can't just have tons of different devices out there without without a common language or a Rosetta Stone in order to make sense of it. So I think the very first step is someone needs to literally take the step to develop the platform and allow devices to hook up into it. And then also, just come up with a few questions that people want answers for, right? So again, it could be, how do I increase customer satisfaction? Or how do I build better operations in the back office? Just a few simple questions, then we know what data to collect and how to analyze it and what information we want to send back to the customer. So again, start very small, very specific, and from there, it will be exponentially growing from a foundational, easy first step.
No, I would agree, and I think that's the question we need to continue to ask our partners and say, what are the two questions you want answered? Because I feel like we get into the churn of a lot of different questions, but we forget to get back to that base question. So final question, because the conversation's been great, and I think we could continue this for days on end, because there's 1,000 things sort of spinning in my brain. But if there is one, and we can narrow this down to even to parts if you want. If there's one piece of data and technology that you would want today, what would that be? And do you have a recommendation on the best way to get to it?
So that's complicated, because again, it depends on what answer we're trying to get to, right? Or what problem we're trying to solve. And again, though, I think I would go back to solving one of the simplest ones we can do, that I know a lot of small restaurant owners and even the larger ones have nightmares about, is the freezers and fridges, right? Like, I mean, giant, casinos or hotels, they have tens and thousands of dollars worth of food in a freezer, and they're depending on that thing not breaking, right? So a simple smart thermostat, or a camera, or some other inexpensive sensor that just says the door is ajar, or the temperature has risen above a certain threshold, send a text message to all these people. I think that can be spun up, literally in months. You can probably take a consumer good that's already out there and modify it so that it's tough enough to withstand the kitchen environment, and you can get an MVP out there to test it out. But I think that would be one that everybody can see instantly the value of.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I think it gets to that ROI piece of it, because we're only as smart as the data tells us, and and I think that's the other sort of barrier that we've got to work through too, is proving to the restaurant owners and the facility managers and all that sort of stuff is, you might think, oh, it's only cracked a little, or it's this, you're not losing that much energy, but you really are. And you have $10,000 worth of food in there, and you've just dropped the freeze point by this, or you've packed too much in front of the cooling fan and all of that. So I think you're spot on there, and I think it's bringing in this adaptive technology and getting people to install it, for one, and really be cognizant of using it, because I feel like I think about Nest, and everybody who's installed Nest thermostats in their houses, and are they actually paying attention to what the Nest is doing for them, or is it they installed a Nest? And I think that's the other side of the coin with technologies, is it's great to have it, but you've got to also use it. So Joe, again, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thanks for listening to another episode of the PartsCast. And remember, if you haven't listened to the PartsCast in the past and you're thirsting more information on the food service industry, subscribe. So subscribe to the PartsCast. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. So subscribe today and get more information on the food service industry with the PartsCast. Talk soon.